the stuff that I dealt with in 2000, it was technically 2008 when everything happened. It was 2010 when everything was made public. And to be honest, not much has changed. And I think a lot of it has to do with the power dynamic in sports. And that is that for the most part, men are the decision makers. You know, men are the people in power. And as long as that weird power dynamic exists, I think this is going to be something that is recurring.
So can you personalize this for us? Like, what do we, like me and Speegs, your husband, and I know he understands it now more because he is your husband, but like, we cannot really put ourselves in your shoes. Like, what do men need to understand about the damage that these types of actions that Brett Favre did to you or Jared Porter did to this reporter, what is the damage that causes on the recipient?
Oh, it's kind of a loaded question because there's the initial shock, obviously, when it happens. Word to the wise, gentlemen, if you're listening and just happen to be looking for great life advice, we are never, ever, 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 ever prepared to receive that kind of picture. You don't know what we're doing with our day. Like, we could be out and about at the grocery store. We could be in our car driving somewhere. We could be, out with girlfriends, but we are never sitting around being like, I cannot wait to receive that message. We just aren't. You know what I mean?
Noted. Noted.
Noted. I mean, one thing you're going to have to get through this entire interview is that I have a very awkward sense of humor, and it's honestly been the only thing that has kept me sane for the last decade. Because if I didn't have my sense of humor and I wasn't able to find the funny in things, I don't know that I'd still be here.
Well, Jen, I appreciate your sense of humor, and I know you've done stand-up comedy with it, and I would imagine that humor has been a great medicine for you. But, like, I have to be honest with you, like, I am so, like neurotic or insecure. Like, if
we're not allowed to laugh. We're not allowed to laugh at this stuff.
Yeah, no, you aren't allowed to laugh. And honestly, I get it. But here's the thing: if I don't make myself laugh, I'm gonna cry, because that's what I've been living. Like, that has been my life for the last 10 years. A lot of people don't realize, like, when a sports story goes away, the impact that it has on the people's lives that are involved, it extends so far beyond that. For everyone else, the news cycle in sports moves relatively fast. When I was going through all my stuff, I was so elated that the Cam Newton laptop story, which I'm sure everyone has practically forgotten by now, happened. And I was like, thank God for those laptops. Am I right? And wow. You know what? No one's talking about his laptops anymore. But when I walk into a room, my name has this weird stench on it that you have to recognize and you have to acknowledge. And that's a tough thing for me to swallow, because it's so weird. Because when I watched, obviously, when the Me Too movement happened, and I was like, thank God we're finally addressing this. But when does it retroactively take effect for me? And that's something that I don't know that I'll ever get an answer to.
I can't imagine what that must feel like to see the reckoning come, like, too little too late for you. So maybe, again, this is a loaded question, and if it is, I apologize. Like, do you feel like that was progress in the direction of a solution, or is there no solution to this problem?
You mean in terms of how Porter's being punished?
I mean the power dynamic, right? Like, at least Jared Porter was fired, right? And there was some accountability for him. So, like, me as an outsider, I'm like, okay, well, there is at least some progress there.
I think part of the problem has been a larger societal issue. I'm not going to lie about that.
Correct.
And I'm not going to turn it into a political statement, but I will say that there was, like, this shift that happened, in 2016, both for the good and bad, where it's like voices just got louder from both sides. And I'll be honest, like, it's really changed who I am in terms of my online presence, because I can only take so much of it. But I feel like while one side of the aisle got really, really loud and they were like, no, we're not going to stand for this anymore, it's like the other side of the aisle got even louder because we had a leader that was emboldened by doing it. Do you know what I mean?
Of course, grab them by the blank, right? Of course.
Exactly. And like I said, it just speaks to a larger problem at hand, and that is that there just aren't enough women in decision-making positions and positions of power to be able to advocate for us and to be able to say, look, the things that are happening to us are not right. It took an actual movement. It took women across this country banding together and saying, from all different walks of life, from the waitress at the restaurant saying, my boss grabs my butt, or, the executive saying, my entire time I've worked here, my boss has been doing this to me and this to me, and I'm a high-level executive. It happens everywhere, and I think we just all need to be a little more aware of it and call it out when it happens.
Yeah, well, maybe that's one of the few empowering things that can be suggested for people to do, for women to do, and for men to do when they catch wind of it and they know it's wrong. Because I feel like the game is rigged against you from the start, Jen. Like, I can't imagine, at the time you're a journalist with the Jets. You're a host.
Look, I'm going to call a spade, and I'm going to say I was a glorified cheerleader that had a microphone because I couldn't dance. Okay, I was a game day host. I was an in-stadium performer, but I interacted with fans and I interacted with celebrities at the game. My journalism career was still young. I had done a few hits for ABC, ESPN. I had done, obviously, some writing for Sports Illustrated, but I was still so young in the game. I had no representation. I had no grown-ups in the room looking out for me, and I was a 25-year-old who had just moved to New York City. The Jets was my only job I had left because the economy crashed, and I had to hang on to that job for dear life while being sexually harassed and threatened with my job.
Yes, well, that's the thing. So you're in that kind of position, and all of a sudden, if a relationship with a potential source or a big name person becomes available, your instincts are to chase that down and further that. So what are you? It's on you then to draw the boundary.
In terms of when you're speaking. Wait, it's on me to draw the boundaries? That's where you're getting it wrong. No. That's where you're getting it wrong. It's not up to the women to draw the boundaries. It's for the men to to keep it in their pants and to act like professionals. There is no reason that I shouldn't be able to go to work and feel safe and feel respected.
Right.
That isn't something that I should have to draw the line for. It's about professionalism, and it's about people treating each other like human beings with some decency.
Yeah, and when they cross over, if they cross over, like Brett did to you or like Jared Porter did to this reporter, then you have to be the one that calls it out. That's where I was going. Not that you have to tell them what the boundary is. They should know.
Where did it get me?
But that's the problem. That's the problem. It didn't work well for you to call it out, and it didn't work well for her to not call it out. So I don't know exactly what's supposed to happen. That's the problem. It doesn't seem like there's a solution there.
Exactly, and therein lies the problem. And it sucks because I love the answer where it's like, well, why don't you just go out and get a different job? This exists everywhere. I'm not acting like what happened to me is an isolated incident. I know there are so many other women, like I said, in all walks of life that experience this every single day. Because I'd be lying if the Jets is the only place that I would say I've experienced something like this. It's not. Okay? And from all of the stories and the women that flood my inboxes on Twitter and Facebook, I know I'm not alone. The problem is it took all of us standing together in a movement just to make the needle move a little bit. And the fact of the matter is it's still going on. And like I said, it comes down to putting women in positions of power and letting them have decisions at the table and letting them have a voice. Because I truly believe if there was more female representation in the NFL at the time my investigation went down, I really don't think it goes down the same way it did.
It's impossible.
Come to think of it, now that I'm sitting here thinking about it with you guys, I don't think I encountered a single woman the entire time going through my investigation with the NFL. Wow. Every single person that they sent to talk to me and question me, every investigator that I had to sit down with and meet with, up to Roger Goodell and himself and the 3 attorneys that he brought with him, all of them were men.
And you know what, Sandy?
I was public enemy number 1.
And Sandy Alderson said today that when they vetted Jared Porter, Jen, they asked a ton of people about his character and they felt great about it. He was then asked, were any of them women that you asked? The answer was no. They didn't talk to a single woman anywhere along the way about Jared Porter's character. So it's still representation matters for people to get hired and end up in places where they can offer that kind of input.
But being in the same household with Cody has really given me this interesting perspective on this dynamic because I've seen it now kind of from both sides, where it's people that vouched for him and his character, and because he did wonderful things for them. You know, he helped them, he mentored them, he looked out for people. But again, you look at the genders of the majority of those people, and I'm sure the survey says most of them are going to be male. And it just goes to show you that you can be someone's friend and ally and be someone's nightmare. Both ends of that spectrum can be true.
No, it's like, I mean, I obviously don't know Cody well, but I mean, his passion and anger was so obvious today when he was on the show and when I was texting with him earlier, because he seemed, and you would know better than me, he seems genuinely shocked that Jared could have done this.
It's betrayal. It's betrayal, honestly, and that's what it comes down to. We all want to think that we know someone and we know how they conduct themselves in their day-to-day life. And the fact of the matter is, I think Chris Rock has a joke about it where it's like, where you meet someone, you're meeting their representative. You know what I mean? You're meeting that version of the person that they want you to meet. And you know what? He just didn't show this side of himself to, you know, anyone but this woman that we're aware of.
Wow.
I don't feel, looking at this, like it's going to be one of those barrages where there's like tons of women that come out. But I don't care how many women it is. It shouldn't be one.
Well, listen to you representing and giving voice to this and sharing your voice and your perspective. And the more you do this, the longer you do the show with Cody, and the more stuff like this you do, the less you will be reduced to just that footnote that you feel like sometimes is the case. Just keep going.
You know, absolutely, and that's what it's all about. Is a lot of people say, why do I still want to talk about it? And I say, look, I have two options. I can let other people tell my story and get all the facts wrong, or I can tell my story, and I can take back my story, and I can make sure that this doesn't happen to someone else again. I don't know if you guys know this. I go and I speak to sports media classes, you know, at my alma mater and also at the University of Florida, and I will sit down with these kids and I will just give them the cold, hard truth that, like, yeah, it's awesome to work in sports, and you get to interview, you know, some of the top athletes out there, and it's so much fun to be in the thick of like all these exciting games and matchups. But there is an ugly side of sports that we are just not addressing right as like a society as a whole. And for me, as a sports fan, I want something more out of my sports. And it's funny because, you know, we talk a lot about our own personal fandoms on the show that we had. And I would always talk about, like, I'm obviously a disgruntled Tampa Bay sports fan. Well, albeit things are trending up for us right now.
Yeah, it's not so bad.
But I can't even personally enjoy it this year when it comes to the Bucs because they signed Antonio Brown. I can't. And the fact of the matter is, we're willing to overlook all of the terrible things these guys do off the field because they're able to catch and throw a ball. Isn't that something?
Yeah, it's not a good reflection on people's priorities. The Cubs fans dealt with that actually in 2016 on the field when they brought in Aroldis Chapman, who had had domestic abuse in his past, to be the closer of that team that won the World Series. And I guess as we're talking with Jen Decker here, and I know we got to go, but the last thing I would like to ask you, and I know you mentioned representation, and I'm sure that is certainly going to be a part of this answer, but this did happen at the Cubs, which is another reason why we wanted to have you on. And this is an organization they say they didn't know, but there's also been reporting that a employee did know and tried to like broker a meeting between Porter and this reporter and was like, hey, use it to your advantage. And like, clearly that's not in any HR training manual. So
that's
Jen,
disgusting. Nowhere in an HR manual ever would they tell you to do that, but go on.
No, I know that, and like we've done the HR training, right? We have to do it every 6 months, I think, at this company. But I guess my question to you would be like, if you could talk to the Cubs, like you maybe talk to the alma mater, and with your experience, like what would you tell them to do? Not necessarily to like make that situation right from 4 years ago. They can't undo that, but like going forward, what is best practices for an organization like the Cubs that aspires to be better, but clearly fell very short in this instance?
I say take your time with an investigation, and I say truly, here's what it comes down to. When you're dealing with HR, the majority of the time, the whole purpose of HR is to not protect you. It's to protect the interest of the company. The same thing happened to me with the NFL. And when it comes to an HR investigation, like, don't scrimp on who you hire for HR, because it needs to be handled with such delicate kid gloves, especially when it's something sexual in nature, and a thorough investigation needs to be involved. And above all else, like, protect the mentality of the victim, because you do not understand the ramifications dealing with something like this can cause you. The sleepless nights, the loss in your ability to perform in the workplace and to work at your highest ability. Like, I can't tell you all of the different ways this has affected, including my marriage. There are times that I just get incredibly triggered by things, and poor Cody's just like, I don't know what would just happen, but I'm going to roll with it. And God bless him. He's so patient with me 99% of the time. But I truly do believe it comes down to sensitivity training and just understanding that the old boys club needs to go away. It truly does.
Jen, thank you very much for trusting us, who you don't know, to tell your story.
Someone vouched for you guys, so
yeah. I appreciate him. I appreciate you, and you're very strong, and your story is very powerful, no matter how painful it is for you to tell it and relive it. So thank you very much for your time, and again, happy anniversary.
Thank you so much, guys.
You got it, Jen. And we're hearing from a lot of men really appreciating the conversation, and a couple fathers of daughters really appreciating your input. So keep going.
So that's Jen Decker with us on The Score.